This episode is brought to you by Never Second. Never Second is a system of fueling products formulated specifically for endurance athletes that provides a blueprint for success by allowing the athletes to test, optimize, and perfect their fueling and hydration. They take the guesswork out of performance fueling. I personally use Never Second on all of my training runs and my races, and I have no GI issues, and you know exactly how many carbohydrates you're taking in based on the names of the products themselves. If you want to try Never Second out, go ahead and use code SUBHUB25 to get 25% off of your purchase.
For OCC, I am really excited to be racing alongside some of my best friends and to be racing against such a competitive and deep women's field this year.
I think the thing I'm most excited about for OCC is like all the Americans that we're bringing into the race. I think that American women's distance running is like so talented right now, especially in the race that we're in. And so I'm just excited to race against like some of the best people in the world, but also some of the best Americans out there.
So I'm really excited to get to the end and get a Poco Local burger.
Welcome to the Sub Hub podcast. I am Max King.
And I'm Kimber Mattox, and today we're doing a race preview for OCC, which is coming up Thursday, August 31st. And as you can tell, we're subbing in for Dani and EmKay, which is great because they're both racing. So make sure to be cheering for them from afar. We'll also be following this up with a race recap later in the week, so keep your eyes out for that.
Yeah, and Kimber, I'm super excited to be doing this because I love that Dani and EmKay are focused on short distance trail racing. And this is kind of one of those races to watch. I mean, this like looking through the fields of both of these races, it's super exciting. It's really, really deep. And so I'm really glad that Dani and EmKay are racing so that we get a chance to kind of do this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I agree. And we've definitely been seeing just across all of the sub ultra distance races, a lot of just depth and interest and excitement around those shorter races. And I think as we get to talking about who's in this race and talking about the fields, everyone's going to be watching this race because it's definitely going to be an exciting one.
Yeah, I sure hope so. And so just to give you guys a brief overview of what we're going to go through today. So we're going to talk a little bit about qualifying and how these racers, how the elite field got there. A little bit of a course description because, we think that's important. So you guys know what those guys are racing over and the gals are racing over. And then we'll do a preview of the men's and women's field. If you guys are wondering how to watch and when to watch this race, the race starts August 31st at 8:15 local time, so Central European time. U.S. Pacific time, it starts at 11:15 Wednesday night. And then Eastern time, that means it's at 2:15 Thursday morning. You can tune into UTMB live via the UTMB website. So all the races are there and they're all being streamed live there. And so it's really cool. You can watch all the races either real time or after the fact later on.
Awesome. Max, will you be staying up late watching?
Actually, yeah, because we have that podcast to record the next day. I'm going to be up watching and making sure I'm taking notes and seeing the moves that people are making so that we can talk about it the next day and get that recap podcast out to these guys as quickly as possible, because I think it's going to be a really exciting race. So I'm excited to watch it just for that, but also so we can bring you guys to the news the next day.
Yes, I agree. And I think for both of us, it'll probably be like first all-nighter since college. But I feel like if you miss a minute, you might miss the break in the race or the move someone makes. So we'll be, tuning in for all those. And if you haven't watched a live trail and ultra race before, one of the really awesome things is you get just incredible views. And from watching last year, they do just a really great job of keeping you informed of what's going on throughout the race, and really just showing you the people out there on the trails that are competing. So I would encourage you that even if you just tune in for a bit, it is really fun to watch. But with that in mind, we're going to jump into qualifying procedures, and I'm going to keep this pretty brief because it's a bit complex and it's also kind of evolved over the year, and even this year going into next year, we think some of these things are going to change. But if we're thinking about that elite field and how those people got into the race, there's a few different ways they could have gotten in there. Number one would be if they were top 3 at one of last year's races. So if they were in the top 3 at OCC last year, they automatically qualified for the race. And then, of course, there were the UTMB World Series majors, and those were just some select races. And you had to be top 10 in one of those to automatically get a spot. So I think we would see, if we look through the list, probably a lot of our elites, that's how they got into the OCC race for this year. And then just like everyone else who's out there racing, if some of the elites had stones and entered in the lottery, they could have also gotten in that way. And if they did it that way, they wouldn't have had to really race their way in. So I know there are some elites that did go that route and got that lucky draw to make it in that way. There's kind of another way that they added on later in the year, which was sort of a descending order list of top 50 athletes who hadn't already made it in, but they had high UTMB index scores. So it was supposed to be that about 50 of those people also were let in kind of in those last couple of months of qualifying. So we think some of the people that we see in there probably got in that way. We do also know there was some age group rankings and scores that could have gotten people in. And then there was this other system added a bit later based on just overall UTMB score. So either the men earning an 830 score or the women earning a 680 score in one of the UTMB races. We think that's something that'll get carried on into next year's qualifying. But again, there may be some changes there. Kind of last little thing is, for some people, they could have qualified into, say, the CCC 100K distance and then submitted a request to drop down to 50K. And if that request got approved, then you might see them on the OCC start line instead. So probably a few people doing that as well. So Max, any thoughts or questions on qualifying?
Well, I mean, honestly, like, it seems very convoluted, right? And I think I've heard a lot of comments from other folks about, trying to get into one of these races is incredibly confusing. You've got stones, you've got descending order lists, you've got UTMB index scores that you can get in by. Obviously, the most straightforward is top 3 at last year's races or top 10 of the UTMB World Series race. But do you know why they used the descending order list to kind of allocate a few remaining spots that only seems to be for this year and maybe not for next year?
Yeah, and I agree. It's a lot going on, and I think they were trying to accommodate a lot of different requests, and we know it was a change this year from previous years. So I think it's kind of a transition into a new process of qualifying. But I think that descending order list and that kind of achieving a certain UTMB index score, I think those were just ways for them to allow more of these top performers to get into the race, even if they weren't able to race at one of the UTMB races last year, or for some reason schedules or injuries didn't allow them to be at one of those majors. So I think they were trying to just kind of cast a wider net of those people that they know are performing at a top level.
And I guess that makes sense because, I mean, obviously, if you're UTMB, you want the deepest fields you can possibly get. You don't want to cut anybody out that wants to be there. And so it makes sense to kind of like throw a net over everybody and say, hey, if you want to be here, there's different and multiple ways for you to get to this race and for you to race here. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, once we get to those lists of people that are competing in this race, we're going to see that they did a great job of drawing in some deep, really high quality fields. So even though it's a convoluted way of qualifying, it seems like it worked. They got some awesome fields. So we're excited to talk through that a little bit more. But Max, you want to jump into course description, give us an idea of what is that course going to look like for our people who are out there competing on Thursday?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the things that's always kind of part of explaining what's happening during a race is the interesting part about a trail race, right? Is that course is such a big part of this. It's not like a a road race where it's going to be flat. I mean, even in road racing, especially with the world marathon majors and stuff, you have different courses, like a completely flat Chicago and a hilly New York. But with trail races, it brings it to a whole new level. And so you've got a ton of just different variables and stuff that courses throw at these athletes in order to, I don't know if it's called tripping them up, but it changes the dynamics of the race and who the strongest athletes are on these courses. And so with this, let's go through a little bit of a course description. There's a lot of UTMB races, right? UTMB refers to the overall week. OCC is one of these races, and you hear a lot of acronyms. There's CCC, there's TDS, there's UTMB. So OCC, it starts in Orsay, Switzerland, travels through Champs-Élysées, and then finally it finishes in Chamonix, France. So you've got OCC. So that's where that acronym comes from. It goes through a bunch of little small towns throughout Switzerland and France, then high mountain passes. And it's, this region is so beautiful. It's an incredible area to run through. And the fact that each of these courses are a point-to-point course kind of draws in a lot of trail athletes, because it's so special to be able to go point-to-point through all of these different areas. So roughly it follows the last third of the full UTMB course, hitting about 33 miles or so. Has a few detours and kind of veers away from that UTMB course a little bit in a few areas, but overall follows that last third of the UTMB course. So it also starts out with a 2,000 foot climb over the first 4.5 miles. You're climbing up to Champs-Élysées, and it's kind of distracting once you get up there, because Champs-Élysées is one of the most beautiful little alpine lakes I've ever seen. Little town there, beautiful alpine lake. All you want to do is look around. Anyway, so then after that, you kind of get a little bit of a runnable section, and then right into another 2,000 foot climb. And this is known as the Bovine climb, and it's probably one of the most technical sections of the course, at least from what I can remember. And you probably, running it last year, you probably have a pretty good idea of what that looks like. And then you top out on La Guette, and then you get a 2,000 foot descent. This is your first big descent. And this goes all the way down to Trient. And at that point, you're about halfway home. And then the course throws a huge 3,000 foot climb all the way up to Col de Baume. And this is where you have a lot of elite runners. They're kind of making moves, putting time on competitors, but it's definitely not the end of the climbing, because after that, you get a huge 3,000 foot descent down to Argentière, and then a few small climbs on the way down. And then you get your final climb up to La Flégère. This is a 2,000 foot climb up to La Flégère. It's the last climb, but this is where things get pretty tough. It's a climb I've done a couple of times as part of the Mont Blanc Marathon, and it falls at the end. And so it's really punishing every time I do it. You're starting to get tired. You've gone a little bit too hard on the first half or some of those first climbs. And this one is where it really starts to eat you up. And so you start to feel it here, and most likely, not saying it's going to happen, but most likely the race is going to be won on this climb.
I think it's so true, right? We're going to see some of those athletes not pacing themselves well, and it's a big piece of the race.
Yeah. And then for those athletes that pace themselves well, they will do really well right here. For those that didn't, this is where they'll start to suffer and they'll start to lose positions because they can't move quickly on that climb up to La Flégère. Then you got from La Flégère, you've got a huge 3,000 foot descent over the last 4.3 miles. And while this isn't quite enough to determine the winner, I think that winner is going to be locked in at La Flégère. I could be wrong about that, but I think they will be. You will actually see a lot of the athletes in the top 20, though, lose positions and gain positions because people are going to start to go back and forth on this big descent. Those that are hurting on the downhills are really going to start to go backwards here. Those that are feeling good are going to start to really roll and pick up a lot of speed coming down into Chamonix. After that, you're home and you're finishing on the storied streets of Chamonix.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just as Max, as you're talking through that course, it was taking me back to last year. And I think those points you emphasized, that middle of the course, like big climb, big descent, there's a lot that happens there. There's people who went out hard that maybe are starting to feel it at that point, and then some people who went out really smart, and you see them catching people. And I know last year, Dani Moreno was one of those that she was really smart, went out pretty conservative, and she made up so much ground in that second half of the race. And then that final climb and descent to La Flégère, everyone seems to be struggling at that point. And last year, at least in the women's race, there was actually a fair amount of changing of positions in that climb up to La Flégère and kind of right around the top. I know that many of us were really struggling. And so even just hiking, if you were hiking faster than other people, you might be catching someone. So yeah, look for some exciting things to be happening for sure in the second half of the race. And with that, let's give them just, if we give you the kind of big picture of the race. So in terms of distance, elevation gain, we've got, this is like 55-ish K, 34.1 miles is what we have that kind of estimated to be. Every year the course changes a tiny bit based on trail conditions and different things. So it may change slightly from year to year. And then elevation gain, we have somewhere around 11,000 feet. So thinking back to those different types of courses like you were talking about, Max, would you call this a course for someone who's more of a mountain type of runner, more of a speedy runner? What do you think?
I would, just because you're talking about 11,000 feet gain over, 33, 34 miles. So you're getting into that realm of like a real mountain race, and so it's a race with significant amount of elevation gain where you can't come into this race just like sticking to the roads and being a fast road runner or even a fast flat runner. You've got to have, some good results in those mountain races where you have significant elevation gain. You're able to withstand not only the climbs, but the descents. And that's where it really gets to a lot of people. And, they may be able to run uphill all day long, but if you can't handle those descents, and, continually like demand that pounding out of your body and then be able to climb after that, you really start to suffer on those last climbs, like up to the last climb up to La Flégère and stuff. So, like you said, we're going to see a lot of people kind of go back and forth on those sections. And those who are patient are going to really be able to move up over that last climb. And, that's going to be the exciting part to watch on the live stream, is that section up to La Flégère and see what happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I agree. The descents are huge. I think just the way that kind of builds in your legs can oftentimes not just lead to fatigue, but a combination of fatigue and cramps, and how people manage those things, not just with pacing, but also the hydration and fueling and electrolytes piece can really make it a dynamic race that you have those ups and downs. So with that, any other things we need to know about kind of horse gear?
Yeah. So one of the things I was going to mention is, with any European race, there's mandatory equipment, right? They love to have a lot of equipment with them over there. And so this race is just like all of those. So, these athletes, it's not like they're just out there running, all alone by themselves with nothing on them. The mandatory gear kind of comes into play as far as like how that affects your race, because you're going to have a pack, you've got some water that you're required to carry, extra food that you're required to carry, headlamp, jacket, emergency blanket, whistle, a bandage, pants, and a hat. And so all of this kind of requires that you're going to be wearing a pack, right? A lot of our races, especially for a 50K, I'm not going to wear a pack for. And so having a pack on might change my strategy a little bit. It's definitely adding some weight to what I'm carrying. And so that's going to affect some of these runners who are out there not really used to a pack.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially we've got some of those kind of more sub-ultra athletes that maybe are used to just a belt and handheld. And then we do have some of those more true ultra athletes that may be used to those bigger packs. So that can certainly play a factor.
Absolutely. And then Kimber, I know like in this race in particular, there's something with the crewing, right? How much crew do you get during this race?
Yeah, this is sort of unique for a 50K plus type of race, that there's actually no crewing for OCC. The other UTMB races there is, but no crew support specific for each individual. There's still plenty of aid stations. You can see that if you look at the course profile, but you can't necessarily give electrolyte bottles to a crew to swap those out, or fueling to your crew to swap those out. So that might seem like a small thing, but I know that for a lot of people, especially the Americans coming over to Europe, sometimes what they have at the aid stations is a little bit different than what we're used to. So it kind of means that they either have to carry more, or that they have to sort of be adaptable to what's going to be out there. I know for me, the big things that kind of stood out were not really having as many electrolytes available at the aid stations, or at least not really understanding which things would contain those. So I think just planning ahead, and I know athletes will of course be doing that, but thinking about carrying extra electrolytes, making sure you've got plenty of fuel, gels and chews and whatever people are using. I think that'll be something that may be newer and more challenging for people that are used to being crewed. Even, most of the 50Ks over in the US, you've got crew a couple of times, or at least the opportunity for that. So it is a bit unique.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, a lot of the things over there are a lot different than what we're used to and accustomed to here, coming over from the US. And it's like a lot of times I'll carry all of my nutrition that I need for a race, especially if it's a shorter distance race under 50K, because I just don't like relying on what they're going to have. But on the flip side of that, if you have a terrible race over there, then the aid stations are one of the best things you have ever seen. I mean, there's meat, there's cheese, there's bread, there's chocolate, there's little candy things over there that as you graze your way through a race, as you're having a poor race, it's amazing. I mean, honestly, like that's one of the best things about the aid stations over there is when you do have a bad race and you can just graze your way through the rest of the race, like the aid stations are amazing.
What's your highlight best aid station food item you've ever had?
I mean, I honestly think it was like the chocolate in Switzerland. The cheese was pretty good. I remember the salami and the cheese. But it's kind of like it's whatever you're in the mood for at the time. They're gonna have it, and it's just like the local fare. It's really good.
I have to ask: was cheese and chocolate? Were you having a good race or a bad race?
It was a terrible race. I was out of it. I was done. And I just had to make it to the finish line. And so I was just kind of grazing my way through the race. And it made my race a little bit sweeter that way.
Yeah, that's great. I remember at one point, I think it was in OCC, it might have been a different European race, realizing which of the beverages was the electrolyte drink, but the flavor was like mint, which is just, a little different. Doesn't always sit quite the same as what we're used to, but that you're right. That's a fun, unique part of European racing.
For sure. All right, Kimber, why don't you take us through the women's field first? Because I am really interested to hear about this field because it is stacked with Americans and some really, really strong women that I'm really excited to watch. It's going to be a great race.
Yes, I agree. This is probably what we're all most excited about. So like Max said, this is going to be a really fun race. The field is so deep and so competitive. If you look at the top rankings by UTMB scores, we see several Americans right up at the top, which of course for us is fun to cheer for them. But we'll also see an interesting mix of sub-ultra type of athletes and then the true ultra 100K, 100-mile type of athletes. So we've got people like our favorite Dani Moreno, Ali Mack, Nuria Gill, coming from that kind of shorter distance end, people that are racing those Golden Trails series races and really specializing in 50K marathon type of distance. But then we've also got people like Katie Scheid, Miao Yao, Heather Jackson, coming from these longer distance races. And then we really have everything in between. We also see a lot of people returning who have either had top 5 finishes at OCC or even at some of the other UTMB races. And that includes last year's UTMB winner, which is such a fun and exciting piece of this race. So it's going to be dynamic. It's going to be unpredictable. And I know last year, Allie Mack took the race out hard and nobody really went with her. But in the field that we see here, I think there are some people who could and probably would go with her if she did that again. But we also know in races like this, it's oftentimes those people who start conservative and kind of move their way up throughout the field, like we saw from Dani Moreno last year, who end up really having a great day. So yeah, so much to look forward to. And before I jump into a few individuals, based on the course preview that we talked through, Max, what do you think? Does this play more to that sub-ultra 50K type of athlete or more towards the 100K, 100-mile type of athlete?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, right? Because you're at that distance where you're going to get some definite success when you're talking about 100K, 100-mile, because the course is so mountainous, because you've got so much elevation gain. This course runs at about, 6 hours or so for the leading women. And so you're getting into ultra territory here based on time. And so I would say this favors those runners that kind of skew more toward that ultra side of things, but also have a little bit of leg speed. I'll be really interested to see, how these women how this plays out and who wins this race, because after you kind of go through this, you'll see like there are some women on both sides of that. And it'll be interesting to see who kind of does better at that distance.
Yeah, I think, great insight there. So
what do you think?
Let's just go.
I'm kind of curious. What do you think about who does that favor?
Yeah, I agree. I think it does favor a bit more the ultra distance athlete. But I think so many of these women that we see in this field, we might think of them as sub ultra and 50K type of athletes, but who just always show up and compete at whatever race they're signed up for. So I think we're going to see some of those more true sub-ultra ladies up there in that top 5, top 3. I think it's going to be a mix. So let's jump in. Let's just go through a few that we have on our list here. These are all sort of people who have high UTMB index scores. That UTMB index score is something that is a combination of different races, how well people finished, how fast they ran. So actually at the top of the list, we have Dani Moreno, which we all know she shows up for every race that she's competing in, and she shows up prepared. We know she was first place at Eiger with a really strong showing. She was also third at OCC last year, so she knows this course well, and she knows how to put together a good race on this course. And she was someone who started conservative and came on strong at the end. So I think we want to be watching out for her. And then we've got Jennifer Lichter, who most recently was 4th at the World Trail Running Championships in the short trail distance, which was a 45K. Although it was a long 45K, a lot of vert in that race that was similar to what we might see at OCC. So I think of Jennifer as being someone who has that strength, that ultra type of strength. She was also first. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is a person, Jennifer is one of the ones that I'm really excited to watch to see how she does. Coming off of that 4th place at World Trail Running Championships, it was a course, like you said, it ran long, felt really long. And so I'm excited to see how she does at this race this year against all of these other very strong women. I got to know her at World Trail Championships, and she's just an awesome person. And so I'm super excited. She's really, really strong. I'm excited to see how she does here.
Yeah, she's a fierce competitor, and strong at those mountainous races like the World Championships in Austria and Broken Arrow. But then she also won Lake Sonoma 50 miler, which is kind of a faster, very runnable course. So she's got strengths all over the place. I think I looked at her ultra sign up, and almost every race that she ran, she was like 1st or 2nd. So she shows up when she competes.
Yep.
And then of course we've got Allie Mack. And if you look at her placing from last year, she was 6th place at OCC, but I think that doesn't reflect at all what her race looked like. She went out and totally dominated the race until she had a rough patch in probably the last quarter or so of the race and lost a lot of ground then. But I thought it was really neat. She followed that up with a win at Tarawera, and she really showed that when she puts it all together, the fueling, the hydration, the training, she's pretty tough to beat. And we've seen her have incredible success at everything from vertical Ks to something as long as OCC. So I think we want to be keeping an eye out for her as well.
For sure. And I love watching Allie Mack. She's awesome to watch when she's racing. And when she's on, and she will not stop until she either falls over or gets to that finish line. A lot of times she falls over, but then she gets up and finishes that race in the first place. But is just an incredible racer. I love watching her race. So it'll be good to see her here too.
Yeah, just totally fearless. And then we've got Rachel Drake, which I think is another person to just keep our eyes on. She's probably flying under the radar a little bit because she's coming back from, having had a baby. And then soon after, she kind of returned postpartum, started to race again. She got a stress fracture, so she had to sit some time out again. So she's had a little bit of a delayed start, I think, to her season. Kind of not quite what she was hoping for, but we see that she ran Sierra Zanal just a couple weeks ago, and I believe she was either 20th or 21st there, which is in a really deep field. So I think we want to be watching out for her as well. And then looking down the list, just adding in a few. So those are all Americans that we've talked about so far in those kind of top 4 ranking spots. I see Nuria Gill on the list, and she was second at OCC last year. She was strong and solid all the way through. She was 4th at the Trail World Championships in that short distance in 2022 in Thailand, 1st at Trans Gran Canaria Marathon. So another really strong athlete to watch out for. And then we've got Tony McCann, who was 5th at OCC last year. So lots of people returning with some top 5 finishes. And I know that Tony did have some injuries and spent some time on the bike in June and July, I believe. But I saw that she recently raced the Davos X Trails 50K at the end of July and had a really strong performance there. So it seems like she's ready to race as well. And then just more big names on the list. Caitlin Fielder, 3rd at OCC back in 2021. And recently she's had a lot of success at some of those shorter races, like the Golden Trail type of races. 8th at Marathon de Mont Blanc, 2nd at Zagama, 2nd at Tarawera. So Caitlin is just another, strong athlete that we want to keep our eyes on. And then this one, I'm interested to hear Max's thoughts on Katie Scheid. So Katie Scheid won UTMB last year. She's got the highest overall UTMB index in the field. She was 2nd at Western States just back in June. So it's interesting to see her sort of dropping down in distance after that incredible win last year. But when I look through kind of her ultra sign up and other things, I also saw lots of first place finishes in 50K distance races as well. So yeah, Max, any thoughts on Katie Scheid, what to expect there?
Yeah, I mean, she's a tough one to crack. Like, we don't know a ton about her because she spends all of her time in Europe. She basically lives in Europe, even though she's an American. And, she is one that I don't know super well. I've only seen her race probably a couple times, usually on live feed like UTMB and Western States. So I think of her as just an ultra athlete, right? And so I'm really interested in seeing what happens when she drops down in distance. Does she have that speed to get through a 50K and hang with, Rachel Drake and Allie Mack and Jennifer Lichter? Does she? I don't know. I think she probably does because, like you said, she's got a lot of first place finishes at that 50K distance in other races. And she's a great athlete, right? So she's probably got enough speed in her to hang with them. And if she's been focusing on a little bit this year, there's no reason why she couldn't race really well up at the front and be in contention for the win here too. Do you know, Kimber, why she didn't just jump back into UTMB this year, or why she's dropping down in distance here?
Yeah, I don't know. And I would love to know that answer. And part of me wonders, just a different challenge. Maybe she's, trying to see what she can do at a different distance. But yeah, I don't know. And I think you're right. She's got the strength of knowing these trails really well, and having that ability to probably, if someone like Allie Mack takes it out hard, she can probably go with her and feel pretty confident that she's got that strength to stay strong through those big climbs. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I definitely don't see her fading on that last climb up to La Flégère. So
yeah. So just a few more women to mention, and honestly, we could probably we could go down the entire list of elites that we see, but Fabiola Conti was 6th at Worlds in 2022, 5th at Zagama, 7th at Mount Blanc Marathon back in 2022. 2023, her finishes haven't been quite as high, but still lots of strong finishes. So 18th at the World Trail Championships in Austria recently, and 14th at Mount Blanc Marathon. So she's tough, and I know she'll be in the mix for trying to be in that top 10, I'm sure. And then Heather Jackson, who I think is also another Bendite like Max.
Yep. She does live in Bend, so.
But I know she's been traveling a lot lately, and she comes from more of a cycling and triathlon background. So she kind of just jumps in and out of whether she's doing trail races or cycling. And I know that even just in the last couple of weeks, she's been doing some gravel races. So it's not like she's full in on the running side of things right now. So that'll be just interesting to see how that biking fitness translates over to this OCC distance. But Heather Jackson, 2nd at Black Canyon 100K and won the Canyons 50K this year. So we know she's got the trail running legs to do it. And with that, that's kind of our top 10 just based on those UTMB index rankings. But we can't leave out, we've got EmKay Sullivan, who we all know is going to show up and run strong. She was 9th at the World Trail Championships at that short distance recently in Austria. Again, a kind of longer type of 50K, 45K distance. And has also shown some really strong performances in the last couple of years with some of the Golden Trail Series races and some other 50K distances. So I'm excited to see what she can do. And then another one that seems like a wild card, but probably going to really be in the mix is Miao Yao, who was recently 4th at Sierra Zanal, 2nd at Mount Blanc Marathon, so kind of those shorter distance races. But we really think of her as more of a 100K and 100-mile type of athlete, at least from what I've seen. So I looked back, and in 2018, she actually won CCC, and I see lots of 100K and 100-mile wins with some really impressive UTMB index scores. So I'm really excited to see how she kind of plays into that mix. So with those names out there, Max, anyone else you think we should be watching out for, or any insights on those ladies?
Well, I think that Miao Yao, I mean, she's one that I just saw a video of her racing Sierra Zanal the other day, racing against Nika Brinkman. And she looked impressive. Like she ran past her, with intention, and she was running really strong. I've seen some other stuff with her running flat road races as well. I think she's got some speed, and I think that she is going to be kind of one of those ones to kind of look out for, and I hate to say it. I mean, that's a lot of women in that top of the field, right? But there are probably another 5 to 10 that will mix it up in that group as well. I mean, you've got Daniela Oimis, who is the Zagama champion, 6th at the World Trail Short this year, 6th at Mount Blanc Marathon. And there's a whole host of other ones who have some impressive results when you're, looking at that top 10 women. So your guess is as good as mine as far as like how that top 10 is going to shake out. But Kimber, what's your pick just for fun? Who are you going to call it for?
Okay, well, I'm not going to give a number one. I'll say maybe my top 4 or 5 who I think are going to be up there. I mean, I'm going to put Dani Moreno in the mix, and Jennifer Lichter and Allie Mack. And I think Katie Scheid, Miao Yao, those are kind of the names that I think will be tough competitors, hard to beat. But honestly, I think it could be any of those women that we talked about, even winning. So Max, what do you think?
Oh man, I do too. Yeah, you just listed the entire field that we just talked about because they're all really strong.
Can't pick one.
I'm just going to call it for Jennifer. I'm just going to say Jennifer's going to take it. I'm putting that out there right now. So Jennifer, don't let me down.
Okay, let's go, Jennifer. I mean, we're going to be happy with whoever wins. These are just incredible ladies.
Yeah.
All right. So we know the women's race is going to be exciting. There's a deep field. Max, tell us a little bit about the men.
Yeah, so the men's field, it's stacked with strong Europeans. Many of them, they're either new to OCC or coming back to it after a few years. There's a few returners from last year, and they're coming back to find a much more competitive field. So they're going to need to either up their game or have a great race to kind of maintain that position they were in last year. A couple of the guys to really watch out for, Norwegians, Stian Angermung, good friend of mine. Stands out to me kind of as the overall favorite. I mean, he's won the last 2 world championships at that short trail distance. Super strong. He's been focused on this all summer. And when he focuses on something, like he usually nails it. And so I'm putting him out there as the clear front runner just because I think he's going to take it. But like right behind him, though, you've got a handful of guys that are going to give him a run for his money. We've got Francesco Pupi of Italy. He was 6th in the world champs earlier this year in Austria. He's strong. He's a great runner. He's been having a really good summer, not injured as far as I can tell right now. And so I think he's going to kind of be up there driving at the front and be really, really strong as well. And then we've got Robbie Simpson. We don't always kind of get to see him on these at the world stage at these really competitive races. Obviously, he was here last year and got 3rd, which is, puts him right in the mix. But he is one of those guys that is always at Sierras and all, and he always runs well. He was 6th this year. He has a whole string of seconds to Killian at Sierras and all. So he's got the speed. He comes kind of from that shorter background, shorter trail, shorter mountain background in the UK. And so I know he has the speed to be up there. It's just at this 50K distance, it's going to be a question as far as like whether he can hang on in the last couple of miles to really kind of push for that win. This year, he also won the Eiger Ultra Trail just to get into OCC. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was also noticing with Robbie that he had 3rd last year at OCC, but the year before that, he was 2nd and only, I think, 3 minutes behind John Albin when he set the course record. So, yeah, we know Robbie can be up there and competing, but there's just a couple other men that are just sort of those front runners, like you said.
Yeah, and it's funny, like Robbie, he's a great runner. He just never really seems to get the win. Like you said, he was 2nd to John Albin when he got the course record. He's been 2nd to Killian Jornet a bunch of times at Sierras and all. And so I feel like he never, by no fault of his own, like he just has some great results out there, but he never gets to the top of that podium because there's always somebody in front of him. So we'll see. I mean, can Robbie do it? It would be awesome to see him win this race, just because, he's always there. He's always in the mix. And he's just such a nice guy too. So, and then next down the list, you've got Antonio Martinez Perez. I don't think you can really overlook him. He's not super well known to me. We haven't raced each other a lot, kind of at the Golden Trail races and stuff. But last year he was 2nd at OCC, and he's got several big wins this year already. I was kind of surprised that I didn't know his name a little bit more. But he is definitely going to be up there in that mix of those top guys, running in the top 5 probably. For most of the race, just because he's got the chops to do it. He's got those race results and stuff. And while I don't know a ton about him, I'm going to have to watch him during this race and really kind of see how he races, because it'll be really interesting to see how he does at this. So, and we've got Bart from Poland. Bart is a friend of mine and also a teammate. And I still, Kimber, cannot pronounce his last name. And I feel really bad about that, Bart. I'm sorry. You're going to have to forgive me. But yeah. Bart is a perennial contender on the Golden Trail Series. He's always strong. He's always in great shape. He's had, a few little injury issues this past year and stuff. And so I think he'll be up there and in that mix. But he hasn't quite gotten to to that level that he was at a few years ago when he was running the Golden Trail Series and winning every race that he entered. So.
Yeah, and I mean, Bart, we don't, it's okay if we can't pronounce his last name because no last name needed. Everyone knows who Bart is, especially probably this sub ultra audience. So yeah, he's got that speed, he's got the fitness, that mountain background. So hopefully he'll be able to bring it and really compete with those guys.
Exactly. Of course, there's always a whole bunch of like younger Europeans and even like other Europeans I don't even know. They surprise me in every single race like this because they come in there, they get top 5 and you're like, who was that? And so I don't expect this race to be any different. I think there's going to be some guys that I just do not know kind of sneaking in there. They either race regionally in Europe and I haven't seen their name before. I haven't raced them for whatever reason, but they're always there. They're, and they're strong and they pop a good race. And so I expect that to be, 2 or 3 guys that I've never heard of break into the top 5 or 6 and they'll be there as well. As for the Americans, Kimber, I don't want to cut them short. We have some great athletes competing, but I do think it's going to be tough for them to break into the top 10. If they do, I think it's going to take a great race from them. Who's your
picks? Yeah, who's your picks for some Americans that might be able to sneak in there?
The 2 that I really feel like probably have the best chance are Cole Watson and Ryan Becker. Becker's been up and down a little bit lately, but I've seen what he can do. And so if he has a good race, I raced him last year up in Whistler and he absolutely dominated and I was having a good race. And so like he could be up there, especially at these big mountain races like this. Like I know he can run well. So he has the potential. Cole has a potential break into that group as well because I know what Cole has inside of him. It's just going to take the right day for Cole to break into that top 10 as well. But he can do it too. The other one that I want to mention is Michelino Sinceri. He's been in Europe for a couple of weeks now. He raced really well at Sierras and all 2 weeks ago, ran 2:51 there, which is a pretty decent time. And he's been having a really good year with a win at Broken Arrow in June. And so, with him, awesome dude. I'd love to see him have a good European breakthrough race out there. So those 3 I'd keep my eye on. And hopefully they can get up there and they all have good races and get into that top 10.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always rooting for Cole Watson. He was one of my teammates in college at the University of Oregon. Yeah. We were both steeplechasers. So I'm always rooting for Cole. And we know he had an awesome performance at Canyons. So yeah, I would, hoping for him. And like you said about the Europeans, I think we also can't discount that there might be some young Americans that, show up there that we haven't really seen before on that international stage. So we can be looking for that as well.
No, totally true. I mean, I didn't mention like Nick Handel and Craig Hunt and Jesseron, but they could, there's always a possibility that these guys break into the top 10, have a really good race and run really well. When you get over there in Europe, like that European racing is always a little bit different than racing at home and stuff. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's a learning curve. But they're really good athletes. And so I always hope for the best and I hope it really goes well for them. So.
Great. And any picks on the men's side? You're going to just pick one and really go for it with this?
I have to pick Stian, just because like I've seen what he can do and he's a really good friend of mine. I love Stian and he is so strong that I just can't bet against him. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick someone else, but I think I'm going to have to go with Stian as well. But I'm going to pick my dark horse of Cole Watson getting in the top 5, just to, put some good energy out there for him. But I think you're right. We're going to have a strong group of Europeans really competing probably for those top 3 spots.
Yeah, I hope you're right too about Cole. I'd love to see that. Cole is such a nice dude, and I really want to see him succeed. When he crushed Canyons this year, I was so happy that he finally had a good race there, and that was just amazing to see. I was really happy with that. So
yeah, that's great. Well, we've got an exciting race to look forward to. Just now counting down the days and minutes. So yeah, Max, when and how can people watch the race? Just so we leave them with that most important detail.
Yeah, just one more time. So Thursday, August 31st, 8:15 local time, Central European time is when the race starts. You can watch it live on UTMB, on the UTMB website. Pacific time, that is 11:15 Wednesday night. Eastern time, 2:15 a.m. Thursday morning. So it's a late night. But Kimber.
And what do you think if people can't stay up all night to watch? I know we're going to try, but if people can't, what are we expecting in terms of how long it's going to take people to finish this race? If our viewers want to just get up and try to watch the last 30 minutes or hour.
Yeah, if you're interested in that last big climb up to La Flégère, I would say probably an hour 15 or so on that last climb and descent. And you're talking about course records of 5:02 for John Albon in 2021. And then the women's course record is 5:45, blending Laurendale. And so we're thinking about 5 hours for the men, just under 6 hours for the women, is probably what we're going to be seeing. So keep that in mind when you're watching those. If for whatever reason, like you don't get up, don't look at any Twitter feed or any news that day, and you can go back to the beginning of the UTMB live feed and watch the race from the beginning all the way through, and you won't miss a thing if you get up at 8 a.m., have your coffee, and just watch the races. So.
And yeah, remember to be cheering on your usual hosts, Dani and EmKay. We're rooting for them. And of course, we'll be back with a race recap episode on either Thursday or Friday. So make sure to keep your eyes out for that. So yeah, let's wrap this up. This has been the SubHub podcast brought to you by Freetrail.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hello, this is Rachel Drake with Nike Trail, and I'm running OCC this year. I'm just super stoked about the really high level of competition. Looking forward to seeing a lot of familiar faces on the start line, and just really grateful to be healthy going into this race and just kind of building confidence with my fitness. I think it's going to be a really fun day out there.
I'm excited for OCC this year. Excited to be back after last year. Redemption in a way. I'm excited to toe the line with all the teammates and just the bonds are out on the trail and give it the best and hopefully run fast and yeah, just to see what the body can do and just push it to the limit. High octane fuel. Let's go fast. Let's go.
I am really excited to race OCC because it's a really fast, challenging course and it is going to push me in ways that I am not going to be prepared for. But that's really exciting because, yeah, it's going to be a time of growth and I get to race against friends and it's going to be really fun.
Just a reminder for you guys that this episode is brought to you by Never Second. Check out the show notes for a link to their website, their Instagram page, and use code SUBHUB25 at checkout to get 25% off of your purchase. That's SUBHUB25.